that he's controversial. We say what we want to, we do what we want to.
Welcome to the Controversial Kings, this Controversial Kings podcast show, and today our guest is Father Paddy Kelly. What is that?
I'm good, and it's lovely to be here and to have a chat about my own life, is it? And
Hopefully.
what I've been doing over the last 40 years, or maybe 78 years. Yeah.
Well, you were born in Limerick.
I was born in Limerick in 1944, on the 20th of October. Limerick was a lovely place to grow up, actually. I had two parents, obviously.
Also.
A mother who was a Limerick woman, going back over the years. She was a cross, and there would be a lot of crosses down in Limerick, even still. And then my father was from Kilkenny. He left Kilkenny when he was about 16, and he came to Limerick. And he got a job in a big store in Limerick, in Boyd's, and he worked there for most of his life. But he was very, very involved in the GAA in Limerick. As soon as he came to Limerick, as being a Kilkenny man, he would venture anyway towards the GAA, and he became secretary and chairman of the Limerick City Board of the GAA. So that was part-time.
Mm-hmm.
But he took on the task of writing. He was a historian in so many ways, and he wrote, before he died, a history of Limerick GAA, which is a book of about 1,000 pages, and he wrote it all by longhand. The history of Limerick GAA going back over the years, 100 years of Limerick GAA, he called it. It was his magnum opus, the big work that he'd ever done. But he'd write every week. He wrote a column of the Limerick Leader, all about what was happening during the week, on the club matches and all that. And of course, he couldn't be at each match. There might be 2 or 3 matches on each night, and he'd have me as a young fella, as a teenager, going out attending the matches, and he'd be at one match and he'd be reporting on that match. I'd go to the other match as a teenager, and I'd go to the ref after the match, and I'd say, would you give me the list of the teams? He'd give me the list, and I'd say, well, now, who are the good fellas and who are the bad fellas?
So he was amazing, yes.
Well, yeah, well, I'd get up, because I wouldn't know much about it. They'd give me all the information. They would know who I was and who I was related to and what I was doing. And I'd come back, and he'd write it into his column then on the Friday for the paper. So he was big into the GAA, and any of the GAA people, if I go down to Limerick, they'd all say, oh, we know who you are. You're Jimmy Kelly's son. But no, he was quite small. My uncles on my mother's side were very tall men.
Oh, yeah. How many get the night?
Yeah. But my mother then was, she was a much quieter woman altogether. She, she wouldn't have much time for the GA and all that, even though she'd support my father very well in that line. But she was an ordinary housewife and looked after us well. A lovely parents, and I had 2 sisters, no brother, 2 sisters, one 5 years older than me, another 5 years younger than me. The older one went on and became a nun, and the younger one went on and was married in 1974, I think. Yeah.
And my sister doesn't know.
Yeah.
I'd love to meet her. She's still around.
Oh, she's still around, thank God.
I'd love to meet
well
her.
in her 80s now, and she's high flyer. She's fantastic health and, very active, thank God. Yeah.
What's her name? Sister what?
Regina Kelly.
Sister Regina. How come I never seen them before?
You probably might have met her once or twice when she came to Dublin. No, she wouldn't have been around that much, I suppose, here with me, no.
Where is she based?
She's based in Limerick, and she is a counsellor in Limerick and does a certain amount of counselling, bereavement counselling. She went to the States and did 2 years in the States. And while she was there, I went out to visit her. My only time in the States, to be honest with you. And I don't intend to go back there.
Well, there was no way your father was a GM, and now you're a GM and yourself.
Absolutely.
And you follow Limerick.
I do, of course. Yeah.
And your father was a Kilkenny man.
Yeah.
So the main question is, was he a Limerick man, or did he follow the Cats?
No, he was a Limerick man.
Was he?
He was, very much so.
Yeah. He was adopted by Limerick.
He was, yeah. I mean, he was an expert in Limerick GA history.
Mm.
And I would remember when we'd be at home at night, fellas would ring him from a pub and they'd say, Seamus, because he used his Irish name, Seamus O'Kelly. Seamus, will you tell us, we're having an argument here in the pub. Who was it that was in goal for Limerick in the 1940s? And he'd rattle it off like that.
As I say, I'm my own father with music. Yeah, ask he'd be able. What was the Christmas number one in 1976? He'd tell you the year.
Yeah.
He'd tell you who sang it. He'd tell you how long it was at number one.
Yeah.
What knocked it off?
I know. No, well, it's the same with my father now. Yeah, and even the week before he died, or a few weeks before he died, he still wanted to write his column.
Mm.
And there was a big match coming up. And I remember going out to the hospital and was saying to him, now, you know, you're not going to be able to put in the column this week because you're not able for it. He says, oh, I'm well able for it. You just get a piece of paper and I'll tell you what to write.
So
I was forced to get a little piece of paper, or well, a big copybook, and he'd rattle off exactly what he wanted me to say. And he would talk about all the matches. We said it was Limerick and Cork. I forget who were playing. And he'd rattle off all the big matches against Limerick and Cork over the years. And he'd have some little incidents out of each of the games, and all off the top of his head. And I said, my God, he has a fantastic memory, especially when it came to GA. And
he sounds like a very likeable, popular man. Especially
he was very popular. Yeah, he was. When he died, we had a huge funeral. I was very close to him because I suppose I was much closer to him than I was to my mother, I suppose, in a way, because of the GA. And, there was a huge turnout at his funeral of GA people from right across the county and different parts of the country too who would have known him.
Well, at that time, Father, you growing up in Limerick, did you have much dealings with travellers at the time, or did you know any, or were you told, keep away from them?
No. Travellers would come to the house begging, you know. That would be the only contact that I would ever have had with travellers at that time. And then, you see, when I came to 13, when I came to secondary school, I went into a college in Limerick. Just to put background to that, when I was in Limerick, I was an altar boy in the Redemptorist Church, one of the big churches that was near our house. And I got to know a lot of the priests there. And they suggested that maybe you might like to become a priest. And I always had that at the back of my mind. I had, really. So I went into the Redemptorist College there, which is kind of a minor seminary. And I went in at about 13. Now, you weren't forced into the priesthood or anything like that, but it was geared towards young lads that wanted to become priests. And I was there for 5 years and got to know a lot of the priests, and a lot of the lads that I was with in the school wanted to also to become priests, and a lot of us then went on and did become priests later on. So that was my, I suppose,
introduction to
the Redemptorist order, because I'm belonging to an order. I'm not under any bishop, as it were. I'm not a diocesan priest. I'm a religious priest, which means that I'm belonging to a religious order, and our order is meant to be kind of giving missions and especially taking interest in those who are on the margins and abandoned.
Is it a tough process now? Because I wouldn't say you just go out there and pick up a leaflet and fill it in and say, I want to become a priest.
No. It's a long process. It is, actually. Yeah, after I did the leaving cert, I had to go then and do a very spiritual year called the novitiate. And that was down in County Galway, at a place called Esker in Athenry. Spent a year there, and that was all kind of prayer and meditation and reflection and what you were about to set into. And then after that, we went in to college in Galway, where we studied theology and philosophy and all this kind of stuff in preparation to become a priest. And then at 1968, I came here to Dublin, to another college here in Dublin. We had a big place over in Marianella. I don't know, were you ever there? It's over on the other side of the city in Redcar. And we did our studies, finished our studies there, and was ordained in 1970. I was ordained down in a place called O'Callaghan's Mills down in County Clare. And I never know why I was ordained down there.
Maybe you were just told God.
No, I wasn't, actually. I was meant to get ordained here in Dublin, but I think there was meant to be an ordination down in O'Callaghan's Mills, and the man that was to be ordained there was from the area, and they were looking forward to it, but he dropped out. And the curate there knew my father, again through the GAA, and asked if maybe I could step into his place. And that's what I did, was ordained down there.
You met with open arms, or are you tested for the whole time period to see, do you really want to do this?
Oh yeah, you really have to think seriously about it. I mean, you're nearly 7 or 8 years, preparing for this. And all along the way, you have to kind of assess whether you're up to this, and the priests that are in charge of you have to assess whether you're up to it also. And, an important point here is that when I was here in Dublin studying before I was ordained, we used to be sent out to work with some marginalised group. And there were 3 of us sent out to work with travellers on the south side. And we'd go out onto the site maybe once a week with a minibus. We'd collect a lot of the young lads, particularly. We'd bring them off. We'd have a game of football. Bring them back for cups of tea and a shower and have a bit of old crack and some sort of entertainment. And that was my first contact, really, with travellers and with other people who were working with travellers at that time. At that time, travellers were itinerants, and that was the way they were looked on, as you know. And there were itinerant settlement committees right across Dublin. Again, the idea was that you get travellers settled and then they become like settled people. I mean, that would be heresy today. That was the way it was at the time.
But that's what they've got to doing today. They're all settled.
Yeah.
So they did do what they were planning out doing.
Yeah, still. But, that was my first contact with travellers. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it immensely. And I said, that would be a group I'd love to work with later on.
Yeah, because most of the settled people thinks that travellers always look for a fight and that. Some of the travellers are the biggest comedians that you ever come across.
Well, that's actually true. We won't say any more about that.
No, we won't.
No, but that was the contact. And, when I was ordained, one of those social workers who was working with travellers came to the ordination ceremony and the do we had afterwards and all that. And then, of course, after my ordination, I was sent out to the Philippines. And I was in the Philippines for nearly 6 years. That was a tremendous experience. My whole years there, I mean, first of all, you had to go and learn the language, and then you had to kind of get used to the weather, the heat, and the language, the food, everything. But I enjoyed that immensely too. I spent most of my time up on the mountains, really, kind of working with people, Filipinos, absolutely beautiful people.
Did you like it?
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I did like it, yeah. And I loved the people. The work was tough at that particular time because there was terrible poverty up there in the mountains. And a lot of the people there would have thought this was the will of God for them. Our, I suppose, mission was to go up and try to explain to them that's not the will of God for you at all. This is because of the way that society is organised. And it's organised for the benefit of those who are not in authority and whatnot. And what you have got to do is you've got to work for greater justice and come together and work for justice. But that was not appealing to those who were in authority. And, you know, you knew you were being watched by the authorities and by the army and by the police. But still, it was a work that I really loved. Unfortunately, then, maybe after about 5 years, I got a word from Dublin, from the boss here in Dublin, that my mother was dying, and he asked me to come home and to be with her, you know, during her sickness. And that was the end of my work with the Filipinos, unfortunately. I came home and I stayed in Limerick for maybe about a year until the mum died. That was 1976, 1977 she died, 2nd of January.
Did she?
Yeah. And then I came to Dublin after that and worked here for a while in Dublin. Then I was here in Dublin. I was kind of going around giving missions in different parishes in Dublin and around about. And then was sent back down to Limerick again to look after a place called a retreat house, where people came to kind of spend time with the Lord. And I was in charge of that. I enjoyed it.
I'd enjoy a retreat.
I was in Limerick.
I'd enjoy that retreat myself, to be honest with you.
You need it.
I think we all need it.
And at that time, too, I got in touch with Sister Patricia and the training centre in Finglas. And I got to know some of the girls in Finglas, including your mother. And I used to invite if we had a weekend free in the retreat house, I'd invite the girls from the training centre to come down and spend a week with us. They'd come down with Sister Patricia in the minibus, and they'd stay a week, and we'd go off around visiting different parts of County Clare and Kerry and Limerick. And it was a great old week. And in that way, I got to know Sister Patricia, got to know some of the girls from Finglas.
Is that how you got in with the Travellers?
And that was how I got in with the Finglas Travellers.
Finglas Travellers.
Yeah. So
I wish you wish you never did now.
No, that was God's hand at work. But and then of course, when my 3 years were up in Limerick, I came back to Dublin. I really, at this stage, wanted to work with Travellers. I knew that was what I was called to at that stage. I went to my own boss there, my superior, and he said, no, that wouldn't be our work at all. You can't do that. And I kept fighting, and then he was changed, and a new man came in who knew me in the Philippines, and he said, look, this is in your blood at the moment. Go and do it for 3 years. 3 years.
Do you know when you were working in the Philippines, were they classed as the nomadic people of the Philippines, or?
No, there was a nomadic group in the Philippines, all right. But I had nothing to do with them there. No. It was just the ordinary farmers and people up in the mountains that I was working with most of the time.
Did you stay up in the mountain? Like,
yeah.
How far was it up? Cause was it hard to breathe up there? Or
No. We had a monastery down in one of the cities called Iligan. And that would be our base. And then maybe 2 or 3 of us would go up into the mountains for 3 weeks. We'd go to a village. We'd break up, and one lad would go to one village, I'd go to another, and another I'd go to another. And we spend maybe 5 days in each village, and then move on to another. And then maybe after 2 or 3 weeks, come back down to the base again, and spend maybe 2 or 3 weeks just relaxing. Well, not relaxing, but working in the city.
Well, do you know when you went, when you told your mother and father at the time that you wanted to become a priest, what was their reactions? Was it
no problem?
Just
they were happy.
Accepted.
Yeah, they were. they probably could see it coming because I was an altar boy. Then I went into the college, and I mean, they could see that coming, and it was no problem. And even when I was ordained, I must say, they said, now look at, if ever you kind of change your mind, we'll have you back.
Who was the first traveller wedding that you done? Or married, or
Your mother and father were what? They're certainly among the very worst.
Really?
Yeah. I actually don't know. I think the first traveller wedding that I went to was down in Navan. And one of the first ones was Winnie and Paddy and Mary, Riley and Jimmy. Because I remember very distinctly, I had an old, I don't know what kind of a car it was. It's a Toyota anyway, Starlet.
It's Toyota Starlet.
I picked up the two girls, the two bridesmaids in Dublin, the two brides, and brought them down to Navan in that Toyota Starlet for their wedding. When you think of it now,
different times,
totally different times. It was. And then the reception, I don't know where that reception was, but a lot of the receptions at that time were down in Russell Hotel in Navan. Very different again from times now. In those days, the microphone was there for anyone who wanted to sing. Or
I seen the video of some wedding in the 80s.
Yeah.
And there was a band, and there was a fellow up singing.
Yeah.
Take turns singing.
But the travellers would be different. Travellers would be going up, singing like old Bridgie. All the older women would get up and they'd sing. Now sometimes it'd be hard to pull them back down.
Yeah. So your boss says yes to you. So what was your first 3 years like with the travellers?
Once I got the permission to work with travellers, then I had to get in touch with the bishop. And I suppose the parish of travelling people was there, Father Michael McCullough. You mightn't have known Father Michael, but an awful lot of the older people would know Father Michael McCullough. He was the parish priest. And my first, I suppose, intention was to work with the parish of travelling people. But in a sense, they didn't have room for another priest. There were two of them there already. So luckily enough, Sister Patricia came in and said, look, I have a job for you. Because even though I was working with the parish, I wasn't going to be paid or anything like that. So Sister Patricia said, look, I have a job here. If you come over here and work with travellers in Finglas, you can do a certain amount of teaching in the training centre, and you'll be paid by the hour, whatever length of time you work in the classroom, that you'll be paid for that by the VEC who run the training centre.
Where was that at the time? Because I know she was over in St. Joseph's.
That was in St. Joseph's.
Even that time?
It was, yeah. Yeah, it was. So I started working there, and I was getting paid for it. And then, of course, that was godsend in a sense, because I got to know all the younger people, the young ones and the young lads then who were in the training centre over in Glasnevin. And through them, I was able to get into the sites and into the homes and the families. We got to meet people that were asking me to do weddings, christenings, funerals, and the whole thing snowballed, if you know what I'm saying.
You got
it was great because there were at that time the trainees in the centres, were from different sites. There were people from Villa Park and Dunsink, Blanchardstown, Ballymun, and that was the great thing about the training centres. And it was an almighty sin that they were all closed down. But that's another issue. But so I was able to get into all the sites because of my contact with the young ones and the young lads. And that was a great start.
Well, there for a long time, when I was younger, I used to see you in photos with
I had a bit of hair at that time.
Yeah, but doing weddings in Navan, and you could be doing a wedding in Dundalk, and they'd be looking at you. And at that specific time, I could have been about 8 or 9, I thought that you were my grandmother's Molly's priest. And when I see it, I say, you should get their own priest. I thought she owned. This is Molly's priest. Go and get your own.
No. Molly now wouldn't agree with that.
Well, that's what I thought at the time.
I know. Yeah.
That's Molly's priest.
Yeah. But I mean, and I always found a tremendous welcome from travellers when you go onto a site, and still do. And I suppose work with travellers actually keeps me alive and keeps me young. And people say to me, country people will say to me, "Oh, God, working travellers, God, that must be a tough job." I said, "No, it's a great job." I said, "They're great. They're great people." I enjoy.
Do you understand that travellers has so much respect for the priests and the nuns and the religion itself?
That's true. That's true.
You don't understand that?
Yeah, but I mean, there is tremendous hospitality among travellers once they know you and they know what you're about. And of course, right? I started working in Finglas, then kind of started moving out towards Blanchardstown and all the sites out there, and over towards Ballymun, and then of course from Villa Park you have to go over to Cara Park, and then there's Moyne Park out in Baldoyle, and then eventually going out towards Balbriggan, Skerries, out towards Garristown. The travellers are everywhere on the north side, and it began to snowball really, and I enjoy all that.
They're clustered together, all right.
They are. Yeah, like I was out the other day in Skerries, and there's about 10 families there, or 12 families on the site. Spent the whole afternoon there, because I'm inclined to go into a house, sit down, relax, have a cup of tea, and chat, then move on to the next one.
But the traditions of the traveller's father, they're disappearing.
They are, unfortunately.
They're disappearing. They're going more down. I don't know where it's gone, but it's definitely disappeared.
Yeah, but I mean, you can look back, and I mean, I think travellers have done an enormous amount for Ireland, and it's not recognised. I mean, I remember a folklorist saying that it was the traveller community that kept Irish music alive, and it was the traveller community that kept, an awful lot of the old stories and the music and so many traditions alive.
The old travellers sing songs that no one even heard of.
Yeah. I mean, I had a great experience on the pilgrimages. One of the greatest experiences that I had in working with travellers were the National Traveller Pilgrimages, where we'd pick a gospel passage maybe, or from the Bible. Like the first one was we walked from Maynooth down to a place called Maine, down way beyond Galway, about 120 miles. And we would walk that, travellers and settled, we'd walk that over a period of a week, stopping maybe at different parts along the way for the night. We'd sit around the fire at night, have chats, stories, singing, then have prayers the next morning, move on then to the next camp spot until we got to Maine, the holy place. And the first time we did that, the local people had a huge marquee out there for us, and the bishop was there. We had a huge holy. We had a penitential service, and the next day we went up the mountain climbing with about 250 people, I'd say, at that one. And that was a huge experience for me, because here I was, a country person, living a nomadic life really for a week with travellers and with settled people, and it was amazing the bond that created. And
that bond is gone. I was going to say that bond has disappeared, and by year by year it's disappeared, and that togetherness is not what travellers are more. And these events,
that's probably true. You couldn't organise that now.
No.
I mean, these were different families, from Finglas, Ballymun, Navan, Longford, different parts, Dundalk. Now, you couldn't have that now, unfortunately, but you could have. I think a pilgrimage is ideal for travellers.
I think so.
Because it links into the whole nomadic way of life. And I have a great belief that in organising maybe pilgrimages for travellers or with travellers, especially I've had the experience of maybe if a family member was very sick, maybe get that family together, go down on pilgrimage to Knock, and maybe, have a special ceremony there in Knock with this family and have a special mass and do all that's meant to be done in a pilgrimage. I had one fantastic experience that I think was miraculous. And I'll mention the name because I think it's well known. Margot Ward from over in Coolock. Margot got a terrible cancer, and she was only given a short time to live, really. And her mother, Chrissy Ward, said to me, look, could we go down? I'll get all the family together and we'll go down to Knock, and maybe you organise Knock, I'll organise a bus, and the whole family, I'll get them all down. And we all went down to Knock, and we filled the apparition chapel down there, if you know it. And we had a mass, we had stations, we had the rosary and everything. And during it, Margot came, but she had to be carried out of the church because she got so sick. She came back, she was put into hospital, and they did whatever they had to do. A few days later, she came out. She's never looked back.
Thank God.
And she went back to the doctor some months later, and he just did the tests, and she told me, he just said, there's nothing there, I can't find anything there but debris. And they said, oh doctor, that must be a miracle, is it? He said, look, the next time you go back to Knock, say a prayer for me.
That's what he said.
And so, that kind of thing, I say, that's maybe what I should be doing, kind of in the sense, organising little pilgrimages like that, because it links in, as I say, to the nomadic way of life of travellers. And I think travellers can kind of identify very much with a pilgrimage, whether it be to Knock or whether it be a holy place or a holy well. They're great for...
Sports days, they used to be out in Phoenix Park. They were great.
They were great days, but again...
You can't do it now.
You can't do it anymore. There are certain things that you can't do anymore that were great in the old days for bringing people together.
That's the togetherness.
I mean, that was one of the great things about the Pavy football team, just to get onto that for a minute. Yeah. I mean, again, there was a Gaelic football team, a Villa Gaels, and that was mainly made up of lads from the site in Villa Park. And that was organised by Bill Shelley, God rest him.
Bill Shelley, remember Bill Shelley?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
He was, yeah. A great man in so many ways. But anyway, that stopped after a while.
Was he the manager of that football team, or was it?
He was the organiser, in very difficult days, because he'd get a group together and they might go out and sure, one or two of them would walk off the pitch halfway through and throw off his jersey. It was difficult in those days.
Didn't like being substituted or waiting on the side. They all wanted to play.
I mean, there were great footballers in those days, like old Joe Collins and all that. But then Major and Paddy McDonald came to me and said, look, will you help us put together another team, Pavy football team? And I said, fire away, I'll do it. I'll help you in every way I can. And that was the beginning of the Pavy football team. We were in the junior ranks of the Dublin County Board. We had a great team. They were natural footballers, all of them, and they played fantastic football. Won Division 4 Murphy Cup.
Do you think they got the respect that you should have gotten at the time?
They did get the respect. No, they did.
I can remember a story there that they won, I think it was called the Murphy Cup.
Yeah, that was the Murphy Cup.
But they gave them the wrong cup.
No, that wasn't true.
Was that not true?
No.
I was told that they give them the wrong cup.
No. I remember getting the cup and going back to the pub afterwards.
Bill Shelley.
Yeah, no.
I was told Bill Shelley rented the pub out till 10, and he made them all go home.
So Bill Shelley would never rent a pub out.
Well, whatever he had.
He wasn't all in favour of a drink, because I remember once we had a match, and we were invited back to the clubhouse. No, I shouldn't say this, but anyway, and on the way out of the pitch, I had two travellers that you would all know in the back of the car, and Bill Shelley looked in and he said, "Where are you going?" We said, "We're going up to the clubhouse." And he looked at me and said, he said, "You a priest and you're bringing two alcoholics to the pub." So
whoever they are.
We'll say nothing about that. But no, I mean, I think that the one great thing about that Pavy team was that there were lads from different sides who would never kind of mix together otherwise. They were playing together and they were organising together, and they got on exceptionally well together, even though they might never mix outside of the football field. You know what I'm saying? So it brought it to a certain togetherness, as well as kind of a discipline. I mean, we were a disciplined team. I think it was only once that a game had to be abandoned because it broke out into an almighty mess. They were highly respected by different teams and clubs across the county. Yeah, they were.
Well, the sense of togetherness, as we all know, and you know yourself, it's disappearing. And mental health itself, with travellers, mental health or suicide. When you started off with the travellers, was suicide an issue at the time? And when did you see it becoming an issue?
Well, I mean, I'm going back 40 years now, almost, working with travellers. And I'd say for the first 25 years, it was never an issue that I knew of anyway. And it was only in the last, I'd say, 10 to 15 years that it really hit us here on the north side. Now, I used to hear stories coming from the south side of suicide, and I kind of felt, well, thank God, that's not the case over here. But now, it's here now among us.
It's massively.
It's a big issue. I think it's very complicated. I think, there are all sorts of different reasons for it, and every suicide is different. I think a lot of it goes back to social media. It goes back to bullying. It goes back to broken relationships. It can go back to depression, drugs, drink, gambling. There are all sorts of different...
I think there's a lot of different factors.
A lot of different factors, yeah, and you can't kind of pin it on any one issue. I feel that part of it too...
Too is, Father, there's just way too much information out there at this present moment. Like, just information coming from here. You look at the television, there could be a bomb gone off, you have a virus, you have this, you have that. Oh, God.
Well,
your brain can't take it.
Again, that's all the media in a way. But I mean, when I'm talking about social media, I'm more talking about, the gossip and the scandal that is, and the bullying that takes place, And I think that's certainly an issue. I think another issue is something that I think about. I'm not too sure whether I'm right or wrong, but it's my own theory. And that is that travellers, there's they're coming from a long, long, long tradition of nomadism, traveling the roads. And I honestly do think that that's part of the traveler's DNA, even though you may not know about it, even though you may be in a house for donkey's years. I think that that's there within your DNA. And I think there's a restlessness also among travelers. If they're in a house or if they're tied down in one spot, I think that there's that kind of, want to be up and out. And that's not possible. That's not possible anymore, unfortunately.
Before, I'd love it to own a camper and just keep going. Just go away in the summer.
And I think that kind of that tendency, I'd say, is in a lot of people.
If you look at the native Indian, the Romany Gypsy, the Aborigine, and the traveller, them four groups of people, their ways of living has been taken from them. And if you look at the statistics of the suicide and the alcohol and the drugs, spot on every one of them. There'll probably be only one figure out of the difference. But they're identical.
But I mean, you go back, even for travellers, going back over the years, they could turn their hands to anything.
Could.
When I started, the lads were going up to Dunsing, the dump, and they spent the whole day up in the dump. Now, you can't do anything like that anymore. They can't go from one kind of job to another, because if you want to go to the markets, you have to have a license, you have to have a permit. If you want to collect scrap, you have to have
even on a van these days.
It is. And I mean, I think all that is kind of going against everything that the traveller stood for, and
they think
all that I think contributes to this higher rate of suicide. Now, I might be wrong, but that's my theory.
I don't think you're too far away from it, to be honest. But anyhow, we'll finish with this. There is a story that you do say.
That's what's coming out.
But you do say it at funerals.
Right.
And there's one of my favourite stories that you do say. You think I'm not listening to you, but I do be.
What to God, there were other people doing the same, right?
You do say it at funerals, and it's the story when you were a little boy. I do love listening to it. When you're going down the train, and you come out the tunnel and you see the light.
Clark, yeah.
And I think when you listen to that story, and now I've just had to listening to your story, I think you were going down that tunnel and you realised that you needed to be a priest, and this is where you seen the light.
Yeah.
So there's a terminology in your story.
I mean, I never ever regret making the decision to work with travellers. Never. And if I had to live it all over again, I'd do the very same thing, because I think they are a fantastic group to work with. I've enjoyed every moment of it. Now, there have been difficult times, no problem. I'll admit that. There have been difficult times, but the difficult times fade into oblivion almost in favour of the more joyful times and happy times. What would you say
be the biggest difference, Father, from the time you get started with the travellers until now? What would you say is the main difference?
There are huge improvements in traveller life. In terms of accommodation now, even though there's huge lacuna there too, there's huge improvements in terms of education, and travellers now becoming professionals in so many different areas. Huge improvements, but there are also a lot of negatives that haven't been there in the past. The drugs being one thing, and I'm shocked by the amount of drugs that are being taken, and that are being sold by travellers. That kind of shocks me, and angers me at times too, that people would kind of, sell drugs to even their own. But I think overall, I'd say there's been a huge advance and improvement. But
It's not going in the right direction, does it?
well, an improvement is in the good direction, but I mean, there are still so many negatives there also, you know. But I'd be hopeful at the same time, like that people like yourself, you know, and John Paul there, who's in the background all the time.
Yeah. Maybe coming out of the background real soon.
No, you know, there are travellers coming back into their own and using a lot of their own talents and bringing them out into the open, and
We're breaking out of our shell, is what we need to do.
yes.
If we don't, we're destroyed.
Without becoming settled people.
No, I'll never be settled.
Now that would be the danger. That kind of you would.
Being a settled person is like, as it says to you, it's settling for what they've to offer.
Yeah, I remember when we came to do the pilgrimages, we were looking for a traveller priest.
Mm.
A priest who would have been who is a traveller. And I remember one of the older traveller men said, "Oh yeah, there are 2 of them in England. We got in touch with them, but they didn't want to be known as travellers." That would be what I'd be afraid of. That kind of people would, once they go up into maybe a professional job, that they wouldn't want to be known as travellers.
Priests, travellers.
That's what I never know who they were or where they were, but I was told in England that there were, yeah. But that would be something that I would hope wouldn't happen, that they would give up their identity.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, anyway, Father, thanks for coming.
You're welcome, and the best of luck to you all. And thanks for the opportunity to talk.
Well, thank you for coming.
That he